had been properly introduced to it at roughly the same age. In today's video, I'm undertaking the hardest FNAF challenge I've ever done. It's even harder than trying to beat FNAF 2 without dying a single time, which I did do. I have to play Five Nights at Freddy's, the original since the movie is coming out soon, while reading a book at the same time. A horror novel to keep it on theme, though not one of the FNAF novels. The rules are simple. I cannot stop reading, so I have to look at the screen very sparingly or out of the corner of my eye only. If I stop reading and don't catch it for a few seconds, I lose. If I die, I lose. The goal is to beat all 5 nights on one run. How far can I get before I die or stop reading? Let's find out. Like and subscribe if you enjoy FNAF content, and I hope you enjoy the video. Oh, and the Pyroraptor video is the next video, so stay tuned for that. Delays on it are done. I finally got the script ready to go. Enjoy! Alright, here we go. Over the period of a few years, an unexplainable anomaly spread across the Earth like a virus, resurrecting all the extinct animal species who have ever lived on the planet. It was slow at first, and more or less went unnoticed, but then suddenly exploded in its frequency of species revivals, and people quickly took notice of what had been previously missed by the masses. Due to the anomaly, which was all the synchronistic event was ever known as, extinct animals, including the dinosaurs, went from extinct to appearing everywhere around the planet in mass and on an ever faster and faster scale. As more and more once lost species appeared, civilization could not hold itself together, and it was slowly overwhelmed until it finally broke apart and collapsed at the seams. Survival for all species on the now overcrowded planet became a toss-up as a free-for-all fight for survival took over the world. The Earth could barely sustain so many competing ecosystems, each completely different from each other, once separated by millions of years each, in its environment at once. Over 500 million years worth of complex life, and over 1 billion years worth of basic life, all fought for the same necessary resources that quickly became dangerously limited. Yet life hung on. As years passed, the species that managed to survive adapted to their new, somewhat unstable but functioning ecosystems, and the world calmed back into order following the planet's 6th mass extinction, and new food webs and relationships between species were established. Among them, pockets of modern human survivors clung on as well. Yet the anomaly, the resurrection event of all extinct animals, which vanished again as silently as it appeared, did one thing. It didn't just resurrect all the extinct animal species that had once lived on Earth. It also changed some individuals of each species, physically altering them and very rarely giving some individuals of these once lost species the ability of higher thinking, intelligence equal to humans, larger body size, and even the ability to speak. There was never any explanation from scientists for what the anomaly was, how it did what it did, or how it had even happened. It had, and that was all that really mattered. This story begins 21 years after human civilization fell, and the survivors were damned to have to survive in a post-apocalyptic future, and follows the Wachowski family in their day-to-day lives and their new hostile world. Lives that are about to be interrupted in the most terrifying way possible when Adam Wachowski makes a startling discovery and a grave mistake. A mistake made possible because of a terrorist group known as the True Patriots, who were living hidden in plain sight in a nearby community of survivors who called themselves the Patriots. A group completely unknown to the Wachowskis created a monster. A monster created from a mix of animals which was designed to excel in combat that, after a failed attack against another community of survivors the True Patriots had disdained and wanted to see burn, was now free from control of the only ones who could put a leash on him. Though injured, their hybrid dinosaur was now on a collision course with the Wachowski family, who were now caught in the aftermath of a decade-long war between survivor communities. Adam Wachowski returned home without incident. The family cabin sat in a large forest clearing, closer to a large, relatively circular pond which was decently deep for one of its size, especially in one spot that was slightly off-center from the middle, that was nearest to the tree line. Adam's morning run to the old drugstore had gone well, and tomorrow, unless plans changed, he would use the bullets he had brought back to go hunt fresh meat, some of which would both be eaten immediately, and some of which will be added to the family's winter stock, because he was about sick of the pitiful excuses of fish that were in the pond. He went around the pond and approached the front door of the wooden cabin and set his bag down on a wooden deck chair that had a roofed porch. That sat on a roofed porch. He opened the door and stepped inside, leaning his rifle against the wall in the entrance hallway, and then shut the door behind himself. Dad! Adam jumped. Adam just had time to turn and see a speeding shape collide with his midsection and wrap its arms around him. Adam grunted at the moment of the impact, then chuckled and wrapped his arms around his oldest child, his only son, Nolan. "Hey, buddy," Adam said, hugging his son, running a hand through the boy's hair. He'd left before anyone other than his wife had been awake, so he had not seen any of his children that day, nor had they seen him. Nolan looked like his father, who he was very close to. He had Adam's face and black hair, though his was not the unruly mess his father was known for having, but a much more straight, downward flowing hair that was much more like his mother's. Nolan was stout when he knew he needed to be, always willing to help out. Always to help out with things away from the house that needed an extra pair of hands or extra set of eyes. Despite that, it wasn't uncommon for him to be scared of his own shadow. Adam knew that Nolan was a brave kid at heart, but his son had self-doubt about that fact, and during tense times he was quick to panic. There was more than a few occasions when Nolan would have run away from a situation and made the issue worse if his father hadn't held him in place. Despite that, Adam had always known his son to come through in the end. Despite fear he might feel in the moment of some event, in the end, Nolan would face any danger despite his terror if it was to protect someone from his family. Despite that, Adam felt the need to prepare Nolan more than he already had throughout various survival lessons, and a good part of his focus had been on doing so. Unbeknownst to him, this had caused his other kids to feel as if they were sidelined or they didn't have their father's confidence. Nolan and his father spent long summer hours together as Adam taught his boy the ways of the new world he'd have to grow up in, the one Adam had been forced to adapt to. Adam had taught the boy the ways of the new world he'd grown up in, the one Adam had been forced to adapt to. Adam had hoped that these long lessons would help Nolan grow out of the shell of uncertainty and fear that had grown around him. But anytime things got tense, Adam could always see the boy struggling to hold himself together. It was that part of Nolan he wanted to see get swept away before he felt he could teach his other kids how to survive effectively. If need be, he felt he was willing to put off teaching his other kids past the age he planned to start on, if it meant making sure Nolan was ready. He had become so convinced of and focused on that he always picked Nolan out of his 3 kids when he needed help on anything outside of the house, despite if his others spoke up with offers. Nolan wasn't afraid of the world itself, he was afraid of what was in it, and perhaps he had less of a reason to be afraid than his father did. After all, Nolan had grown up knowing that world. Adam had been thrown into it unexpectedly. To Nolan, the world his father had grown up in, a world filled with cars, movie theaters, school, and a worldwide connection through the internet, and no living dinosaurs, sounded like the most alien thing ever. He couldn't comprehend the world his father had spent his youth in, despite hearing about it many times, and living within the shell of what it once was. Despite that, he was afraid of the things in the world, even if he knew deep down he'd always face it when he was needed, and yet his fear had never won out in a tense situation. "Adam?" A voice from the hall called. He smiled and looked up. "Hi, honey," he said, stepping away from his son. Stepping away from his son and wrapping his arms around his wife as she entered the front hall. Adam and his wife had met in high school and had met in high school and had been together since. A true case of high school sweethearts, if there ever was one. When she came with Adam to the cabin, in the interludes, I can take a break. Holy shit! This is way harder than I thought it was going to be. I can take a break in the interludes. Though she had worked hard to make it a home for their family, once it became clear that there was no going back to normal. She always felt deep down that there had to be a safer place somewhere. Her name was Kalani, and she'd been feeling the urge to say so more than usual lately, for a very important reason, and felt that it would just take one more unexpected incident occurring for her to finally say something about it. It had been more than 10 years since she brought up looking for somewhere else last. She was certain others had to be out there, perhaps not far away. By all accounts that she had gathered near the beginning of the apocalypse, most of the populace had survived initially, and while that number of survivors would certainly be much lower at the current time than it had been 2 decades prior, she still felt confident the sheer number of people who'd survived meant there had to be safe areas with large populations of people somewhere. In terms of appearances, Kalani looked younger than she was. Despite the constant stress that came with surviving in a post-apocalyptic world, she could still pass for someone in their mid-30s. Meanwhile, Adam looked slightly more aged than he actually was. Kalani had blonde hair that ran to just above her shoulders. She could also shoot just as well as Adam could, and was approving of the idea of her kids learning the hard truths of survival. But she had been reluctant at first, as any mother might have been, state of the world or not. As Adam embraced her, he kissed her on the lips, then the cheek, and then took a deep breath of her flowing hair. "Don't get frisky here," Kalani chuckled as he did, pulling back just a little bit. "Oh, what's wrong with a little frisk?" Adam asked, kissing her on the neck before scooting back with a playful smile. He took her hand and placed his other one on her still relatively flat stomach. There was a 6th member of the Wachowski clan on their way. They were due for arrival in 5 months. The new baby was, in fact, the very important reason Kalani's resurgence of old wishes for somewhere safer. The new baby was, in fact, the very important reason for Kalani's resurgence of old wishes for somewhere safer than their cabin. "What's wrong?" "The eyes of one of our children are on us," Kalani said, lifting his hand away, trying to sound serious despite trying to keep laughter held back. "That's what's wrong. That's what's wrong. He doesn't want to see frisking." For extreme measure, she then also pointed at her belly. "And number 4 might be listening." "Oh, fine," Adam said, pretending to pout for a second, before then leaning forward. "I'll save the rest of the frisking for later. Baby number 4 won't hear anything." He whispered, kissing his wife on the neck again, before walking out of the hallway. The fourth family member walked out of her bedroom as the group exited the hallway and entered the living room. "Hi, Dad," the middle child, the eldest daughter, greeted. She then shot her brother her usual glare. Aside from feeling resentment towards her father for what she saw as him willfully ignoring her, she was jealous that Nolan... She was jealous that Nolan got to learn the ways of surviving and she got nothing. Her family always immediately defaulted to saying she was still too young. As a stubborn 12-year-old, she found that infuriating and hard to take. She found that, as a stubborn 12-year-old, she found that infuriating and hard to take. Especially since Nola had been properly introduced to it at roughly the same age. Nolan had been introduced to it at roughly the same age as she was currently. Yet, in his quest to help his son, Adam had never took the time to see why she was always so sicked off, especially when her younger sister never threw a tantrum over anything. Kalani found that when she brought up that Nolan had been 12 when he was given his first real lesson as well, her father... he was given his first real lesson as well. Her father just seemed to not want to hear it, and it made Katrina very irritable. She felt that she was just going to explode one day, likely soon if things did not change. Whew. Hey, Katrina, Adam greeted. Katrina rolled her eyes and went back to her bedroom, shutting the door, having just come out to give her curt greeting, as she always did. She came out of her room to give her curt greeting, as she always did. She went back to her bedroom, shutting the door. Unlike her mother and younger sister, Katrina's hair was a curly mess. Though like her mother and sister, she also had it was also a bright shade of blonde. She was also the only woman in the house who ever seemed to stay grumpy. Even Kalani had never been so short-tempered when she was pregnant. Adam once joked that there was perhaps a genetic connection with the curly hair leading to grumpiness, since she had inherited it from his grumpy grandfather. Though Adam knew part of it was because she felt he didn't think she could handle herself in the outside world. He didn't think that was the case at all. He would teach her. What? He would teach her! He would teach her the ways of the world like he taught Nolan once he was sure Nolan could handle it. Once he was sure Nolan had learned all he could. I can't handle it. Once he was sure Nolan had learned all he could, and once he was sure Nolan had learned all he could and had gone as far as he would go, and maybe once he was sure Katrina had matured past whatever tempered state she was currently in, Adam never really understood that his lack of clear communication with his eldest daughter was... someone's calling me. Was never... the lack of clear communication with his eldest daughter had sparked their division, despite what Kalani might have told him. The usual, Adam sighed. Kalani must have thought otherwise, but... Kalani might have thought otherwise, but Adam felt she was still too young. And he didn't plan to think otherwise. And he didn't plan to think otherwise until she was at least 13. In his eyes, 12 was too young. Hi, Chica, I didn't even see you. In his eyes, 12 was too young. That was in 5 seconds. In his eyes, 12 was too young. Nolan had only gotten the basic lessons at that age, and the big stuff had waited until the following year. And while Adam's focus on his son might have come off as favoritism, in the eyes of his other kids, especially to Katrina, when she had learned that she might have to wait past 13, it didn't help. When she had to learn she might have to wait past 13 to start learning things. If Nola didn't meet her father's expectations, that wasn't the. In truth, Adam simply didn't want to expose the harsh reality of the outside world until he felt his kids were old enough to handle it. Fuck you. Until he felt kids were old enough. Nolan was at that age, and the others simply weren't. Nolan was at that age, and the others simply weren't. Katrina truly had no idea how violent and scary the outside world. Katrina had no idea how violent and scary the outside world could be. Oh my gosh, this sucks! Why did I think this was a good idea? This sucks! Remember, I get 5 seconds of not reading, and then I lose. Oh gosh, Night 3 is gonna suck. Night 3 is gonna suck. Okay, she'll get over it. I gotta start. She'll get over it, Kalani said. Having long learned that it was fruitless to try and explain... I have to check Foxy. Having learned that it was fruitless to try and explain to the both of them why things were the way they were between them.
Oh, hey, you're doing great.
I don't care. Why things were the way they were between them. Yeah, I thought you... Yeah, though, I think you said the same thing 6 months ago, he said, looking at her and at his son. Another thing he failed to realize was the fact that he never simply sat down and told her why he was waiting, or why he didn't seem to give her as much attention. His focus on helping Nolan was so persistent that such a simple idea never crossed his mind. It never crossed his mind. Partially because he felt he didn't need to explain why. Partially because he felt he didn't need to explain why. Hey, Adam asked, looking around the living room just to make sure he had not overlooked the unaccounted-for family member. Where's Maeve? Maeve Wachowski, the soon-to-not-be youngest. Maeve Wachowski, the soon-to-no-longer-be the youngest. The soon-to-no-longer-be youngest family member hurried through the forest like she did almost every day. Like every day, she did it secretly, without any weapons. For a 10-year-old, this was not exactly... Hi, Chica. For a 10-year-old, this was not exactly the safest thing to do, but she never thought about any of the dangers that had lurked out in the forest, having spent her whole life surrounded by their presence. She was so used to them. It also helped that there's a certain trio out there who helped keep the area clear of most threats, and had done so since they'd moved into the area. Ah! Though before Maeve met them, it was an unintentional service. Now it was one they went out of their way to perform in order to protect her and her family. Like her sister, Maeve also wanted to learn how to survive. But she, too, had been told by both her father and her mother. That she was too young. Though unlike Katrina, Maeve decided to do something about it, instead of just pout, throw tantrums, and start arguments. Maeve, being the defiant kid she was, had searched and found her own way to learn, taking the issue into her own hands. Her little secret group of friends she'd made in that quest were now teaching her how to survive. Hence why she was out in the forest, not worried about possible unseen dangers, though they were certainly there. As she passed through the trees, she stopped when 3 velociraptors, all of whom had large claws, crept out of the trees in front of her. While velociraptors typically were not as tall as someone even Maeve's age, and were covered in feathers, and were covered in feathers as well. The 3 individuals now standing before her, in the clearing before her, were all almost Utah Raptor size, standing taller than even Adam did, and only one of them adorned any feathers at all. Though one feature they all shared, other than being oversized for their species, was their bird-like wrists, and their inward facing palms. The same. It was bird-like wrists. The same. Shit. I lost my place. Kill me, Chica. I completely lost my place. I think that counts. Yeah, even Freddy's laughing at me. And my dog's barking. Wow. I completely lost my place. And I could not find it again. Thanks, Chica. You released me from hell. Wow. That was awful! That was awful. That legitimately sucked. I'm usually great at FNAF 1. Not being able to look at the screen for longer than just a quick glance makes this game a whole lot harder. Alright, if you like this idea somehow, if you like this idea somehow, let me know and maybe I'll do it again with one of the other games. Can you imagine trying to wind up the music box in FNAF 2? Doing this? Oh boy.